This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us again in another coffee number 5. And today we're here with Niki Smart. I'm so happy to have you here today, and it's a pleasure. I've been following your career a little bit. You've been in your dream job. You've been working as a designer, car designer, over the years. You've been in different companies, big companies. Can we say the names like Ford Motors and some studios?
Motors,
yes. Yeah. And it's a big achievement getting to be a car designers. There are so many people that they want to be this when they grow up. Like, how many kids you ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? And they tell you, oh, I want to design cars. But to go from there and to actually be a car designer, it takes not only talent, effort, but also you have to have the right connections and be in the right place at the right time. So what you don't tell us a little bit about your story, how you got there?
Yeah, well, as you say, as a child being obsessed with cars, you're certainly not aware that there's a job where you can potentially do what you love to do at 7 or 8 or 9 years old, and you can do that for a living and actually make a career out of it. So, I mean, as a kid, I was aware that saying I like to design cars was sort of akin to saying I want to be an astronaut or a jet fighter pilot. It's something that is one thing to say, but it's quite a kind of loose idea, and it feels very conceptual. And I think it felt that way for my parents because growing up, I think it was difficult for them to realize that the thing I was clearly passionate about, could actually lead to a career. So for me, I actually found out quite late going through school that I could actually work as a car designer. So the thing that I loved to do that was just this kind of time wasting exercise, I think in a lot of teachers' eyes, was actually a profession. And there were people out there essentially with the skills that I was developing. So the hardest part for me was actually discovering by chance that you could study vehicle design, and the way that vehicles were actually designed and engineered, you needed actual artistic designers at the beginning of the process to come up with ideas and to actually draw the things they're imagining and communicate those ideas to then get those ideas engineered and developed further down the road. So as a kid, I just didn't know that was a reality. So as I say, I found out fairly late that was a possibility.
And I think that kid never knew either to design a little piece of a car, like even a light, it will take you hours and hours. It's like every piece of a car is so well thought, and there's so much work put into it.
Yeah, it's interesting when people ask what they ask what I do, and I say I'm a car designer, and I think it's still a fairly vague notion of, but what do you actually do? How does a car actually get designed, and what bits are you responsible for? And I have to sort of point out that essentially anything you see or touch needs to be designed. Arguably anything you don't see or touch could just be engineered, but a good engineer is conscious in a lot of the same ways that an industrial designer is. So I don't see this kind of clear division. But yeah, when you look at a car, as you say, every single surface, every line, every button, every radius, every clunk click of every actuation that you feel and every lever that you pull has not only been engineered, but designed to work in a way that's comfortable, that communicates information well, that is sensuous to the touch and enjoyable to look at. I mean, all of these very ethereal ideas are actually designed and engineered into a car to such a high degree. They really are quite remarkable objects, and we take them for granted because obviously we see so many examples every day, and there are so many different brands out there doing essentially incredible jobs. It's really quite a unique product. I think there's nothing else that we buy in life that's so expensive and so complex and well developed.
But I think also what people don't realize is that this is such a big teamwork job, that there are so many designers and so many engineers and many other factors that they contribute in the final design. And if all these people and teams don't collaborate and work together, the final product can be a disaster.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a lot of people ask why it takes so long to produce a vehicle, and it really is, even with the most advanced manufacturing techniques and the way that everything is developed with computer data as the master reference, so going from design into development of engineering criteria and feasibility into production and then into manufacturing. It's a lot more streamlined now than it was decades ago, thanks to the use of computers. But the teams, as you say, that are involved at the very beginning of the program, it's 3 or 4 years in most cases. And the people that are involved at the start are predominantly not involved at the end. So you go through these stages of essentially handing over the baton of the vehicle's development to different parts of the company, in different parts of the organization. And each part has to optimize their aspect of the job. And yeah, it's an incredibly complicated process. And it's fun as a designer when you first join a production studio to see the artistic creative end. But then you look into this abyss that is the development and engineering and manufacturing, distribution, marketing. I mean, it's this very, very long road that you suddenly see that you are sat right at the beginning of, and you rarely get to travel very far down it. But it's good to appreciate how long that is and the people involved along the way.
Well, that's what happened to you. You started from the bottom and you were a designer and you grew in the process and you got to a point that you were not a designer anymore, basically. You were a manager. And how a designer, a creator feels like when he stops designing? How do you go about it? How can you be creating and managing a team and having all these skills and trying to tell people how to do design work without using your design skills every day?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of different, as a design manager, I mean, the sort of joke in the industry is it's sort of the worst job. You don't really have any authority to decide the direction of things, but you also don't get to do the creative end. You're kind of this piggy in the middle. And there are different types of managers, but for me, I was certainly the type of manager, and this is relatively common, that with a great deal of experience as a designer and then a senior designer, as you basically take on more and more responsibility with each program, you ultimately get to the point where you've got a relatively good understanding and you can actually manage a program, and then you're managing people. And those people are essentially where you were several years before. So you're now trying to shepherd them through a process, protect them from a lot of the essentially bureaucracy and complexity and logistics of the program, and just keep them thinking creatively. So you're trying to isolate them to protect their creative environment, essentially. So it's an interesting process, because I think your naivety when you join a company is something that, even if you're not aware of, you're certainly aware you want to improve and gain knowledge and become more of an expert. But actually that naivety is one of the greatest assets you can have, because once you've lost that naivety and it's replaced with knowledge and understanding, there's a lot of potential ideas that you don't follow up because you're aware of all of the issues, and you often kind of find yourself being less creative. So it's quite a natural progression to go from a designer to a manager, and then to help younger designers. And you see these designers gain more and more knowledge, and before long they're managing programs as well.
So you got to this point, you were a manager, and then you decided, okay, I want to do something different. I want to go back to design. So you came up with an idea. How did you come up with this idea, and how did you go about it?
I've been pretty much obsessed with anything with wheels, I would say, since I was a tiny kid. And the first love that you have is essentially a bicycle. And in my case, it was a 3-wheeled bicycle. But once you get onto
what
2
color
wheels,
was it?
it was, I've got a picture of it on the wall here. It's a little blue 3-wheeler with, but it had quite big wheels. And it wasn't long before I was learning to ride along on 2 wheels. And yeah, I transitioned really quickly to a bicycle, and obviously the sense of freedom once you first get onto a bicycle.
I'm sure what was the same time as me, that we didn't wear helmets or nothing.
No, it wasn't even a consideration. Absolutely.
No, absolutely no.
I had many occasions to run into my mother with my head bleeding, or yeah, I was forever bashing myself up. But yeah, I was passionate about bicycles and just movement, anything that was dynamic. And I grew up working in as a child, my father had a shop making exhausts for racing cars and vintage cars. So I was around cars a lot, riding my bike a lot. So I was always passionate about bicycles, and I really loved cars. So even though I was drawing cars all the time, I was riding bicycles all the time. And essentially, I kind of, later on in my car design career, I realized how much I really loved motorcycles. And so as a side project, as I moved further and further away from the creative aspect of car design for my professional job and more into management, I developed more of an appetite to design motorcycles on the side. And it was purely a medicinal project. So a project that I began without any timeline to finish it. It was really a project that I began to enjoy the process of designing and working problems out and making things. So I really enjoy actually the making part. And it's the part I most enjoy in the vehicle design process, seeing the actual ideas come to fruition. But for me, it's the ultimate test of how good your idea is how well you can get that thing into reality.
Well, I have to say, your bikes are gorgeous. So
thank you.
no, there, I mean, you guys, I will put your website here in the chapter notes because you guys need to see them. And how do you come out with ideas? I mean, what make people tick? And that's what we are interested. How do you know that this is what people would like? Do you talk to people? You know what bikers, who is your target audience? How do you develop your brand?
Well, as you probably well know, you know, with the world of marketing, we do try ever more to understand what people are going to want. It's not what they want now in the case of cars, because we can't make them a car today. We can start designing a car today and it'll be available for them to hopefully buy in, as I say, 3 or 4 years. So this game of trying to predict not only what people like now next year, but in several years' time. I mean, it's
and what the technology will be in by then.
Exactly. I mean, and to say it's a moving target is an underestimation. So honestly, for me, doing, you know, that's the case with the day-to-day job. And I think there's often arguments about how much expertise you have within the design studio. Should you just design the vehicles that you believe in, and people, if they're good enough, will be drawn to them? Or do you really need to understand what people are going to want and then trying to design to their expectations? And I think there's a good argument either way. But for myself, designing my motorcycle, I just wanted to design something that I felt made sense. You know, if I've got decades of experience and I've drawn these objects, whether it be cars or motorcycles, tens of thousands of times, I've studied and fantasized about vehicles in the past and kind of really connected with certain aspects of how they look and how they feel. I just wanted to do something that I felt was a good expression of what I could see as an ideal kind of design. And if people liked it, great. If people didn't, as long as I felt happy about what I produced. And this is something that I end up telling designers in the design studio, because often we'll go through reviews and it's difficult to understand the feedback and you're not sure about the direction that you went, and you think that you understand what the person wants. And before long, you've basically designed all of the spirit out of your idea and you're just trying to guess what the person wants, and you're no longer emotionally invested in the design. And because it's not an expression of you now, you're actually trying to calculate what somebody else wants. And I think it's often to the detriment of the design. I think unless you're really happy about what you're producing, I don't think you can be happy as a designer, because 99% of what you create as a designer goes in the trash. And it's honestly one of the hardest aspects of being, certainly in my experience, a vehicle designer, especially working in advanced design, because essentially you go to work every day and you know, if you're honest, that essentially what you do will go nowhere. And it's really hard to, I think a lot of people struggle in their careers where they don't see their designs going to production. That's obviously the dream, but that happens 1 in 1,000 times. And for people working in advanced design, that's not your job. Your job is to create ideas that influence the production design. So I think unless you're making yourself happy, you're going to be a very sad designer. And I see people get depressed because they don't see what they consider as success happening in their career. But I get back to, you have to find a way to fulfill yourself with your day-to-day productivity. And if it goes somewhere, that's a bonus. And I think in that situation, then it's a lot more healthy for you.
Yeah, I think what, at least myself, I didn't realize early on in my life that a lot of the work that I will do wouldn't work, and I would have to do it again.
Yeah.
And I know that it's frustrating, but I had to learn to deal with it. And that was, I think, a skill that I learned along the way, and it got me where I am now. And I'm not gonna lie, I've been around for a little while already, and I don't think I would be around if I didn't have all the experiences that I have, and it will take me where I am today. But I've been talking to a lot of people lately, and I feel like people that they came out of college or people who want to change careers, and they say, I can do this by myself, or I don't have to have all this experience. So I don't have to go and work for others in order to go and start something on my own. Do you think that if it would be that boy who finished college, you graduated from design school, you would be able to do what you're doing now? Or you think all these years of experience taught you a lesson?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, in the context of designing something as complicated as a vehicle, and if you're good at it, that's a vehicle that can be made. It's no good designing something that doesn't work, as you say. So yeah, the experience that I've gained over the last 2 decades working for big manufacturing organizations, that's been priceless. I still believe that your ability as a designer is how well you understand the next part of the process, and the next part, and the next part. And even though you may be less and less involved as something you've designed carries on down its journey to actually being made, you still need to be involved. You still need to be connected. So your ability not just to understand your role, but the role of the people around you that are actually going to carry on, take your baby and basically take it through to production. So I mean, all of the experience you gain. I mean, and as you say, you talk about the things that you've learned. I think if most people are honest, they tend to learn more from the failures than the successes.
Absolutely.
And it sounds counterintuitive when you're younger, because all you want to do is focus on getting things right. But it's the process of not getting them right that helps to steer your understanding to increase your chances of getting them right the next time.
I can tell you that, for example, I remember today more bosses that I hate, that I can try not to be them.
Yeah.
That bosses that they were just okay.
I mean, it's such a difficult perspective to have when you're younger, because you only know what you know, and you're desperate to prove yourself as capable as possible. But it's so hard to think about the long game view, which is to say, and I try and do this with my children, is to try and see anything you're doing as a means to an end. It's just a means to be able to do it better the next time, or the 5th time down the road that you do it. Hopefully you'll be better at it. And the only way to do that is to be able to look at each time you go through this process of trying to see how you could do it better and being open to change. And I think even if you're a perfectionist, and you want to do things, as perfectly as you possibly can, I think if you're honest, you really do sort of see the gain in actually looking at each effort, each attempt, I guess, on your part as not being the final end game, and it's so hard to have that perspective. And I see it with my children. They're doing a drawing, and they're sort of can't see the wood for the trees because they're desperate to get this small detail right, and then they zoom out and realize that the scale's all completely wrong, but trying to get them to sketch out an idea and just to sketch out the basic proportions first before they get drawn into the details. And that's essentially what we do with every experience. We focus on this experience right now as though it means everything, and there's nothing wrong in that, but to have in the back of your mind that try and learn from this so that you're better at doing it the next time. It's really difficult. I understand why it's hard to do that as a manager, and I see the frustration in the people that I've tried to help in the studios.
But also now you have to run a business, which is another learning experience.
Yep.
So how that you do that? You have a whole design world, one part of the brain, then you have to run a business, another part of the brain. How is that learning experience?
Yeah, I think if you're working in an industry where you're manufacturing something, there's an extremely powerful motivation to be realistic with the things you're trying to send down the pike. And I think in the case of a car, it's very hard to avoid those lessons as you sit in meetings about manufacturing costs and distribution of a product and marketing, and it's quite eye-opening, even if your passion still lies firmly in that ideation stage. So for me, the service I offer to people is the ability not just to design something, but to have some sympathy with what it is that they're looking to make, what it is that they're looking to put out into the world. And very often that comes down to how many of these things are they going to make, and it can be a completely different set of processes that they're looking to use to make that thing. So I need to tailor how I approach my design services for them towards how they're looking to make the object. And obviously the difference between making a one-off custom motorcycle that to all intents and purposes is a piece of art, to something that's a high volume manufactured product where you're desperately looking to save as much money on every component as you can so that you can get to market with the most competitive price, so that you can make a profit and stay in business. I mean, they're very, as you say, it's two parts of the brain. They're quite removed from one another. But, I think the experience of working in a big manufacturing business essentially is that I can empathize with what people are up against if they're trying to put something out into the world.
Well, I think you sum it up really, really well. And I really wish you good luck. And I really want to go and check out your bikes one of these days.
Well, I'll be happy to show you.
Well, thank you so much for coming today to talk to us.
And it's a pleasure, Laura.
And we'll keep in touch. And
Absolutely.
I'll talk
and
to you
good luck
soon.
with your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.